Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Dojo Live. My name is Kim Lantis, stepping in for the usual host, Tulio Siragusa, who finds himself flying across the continental USA in this very moment. But today is Wednesday, June 9th, and we're excited to be talking to Rich Kahn, CEO of Anura, and he'll be telling us all about ad fraud. So first of all, thank you for being here today, Rich.
Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. And of course, I've got my, per the usual, co-host, Carlos Ponce, broadcasting out of Cuernavaca. And Mario Navarro out of Chihuahua. She's with us on occasion. Good to see you again, Mario.
Hi, Kim.
Hi. So, Rich, let's go ahead and get started today. And the first thing we want to know is about you. Who is Rich Kahn outside of CEO of Anura?
That's always an interesting question because, you know, as an entrepreneur, your whole life is dedicated to your business. So you try to find things outside of your business that, you know, define who you are. So I'm a father of four. Actually, my youngest is just about 21. I'm a private pilot. That became a little hobby of mine over the last couple of years. Me and my son went and got our pilot's licenses together, which was nice. I've been a developer. I wrote my first game when I was 9 years old. Been developing code ever since. 17 or 18 years of martial arts study. Let's see. I even got invited to the Olympics for martial arts, but turned it down. Going on at that point. Yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff and things that I do, but you know, my wife and I have been together since we're 15, so we're high school sweethearts. That's pretty much, you know, my back end.
You seem like an extremely interesting and very well-rounded man. Congratulations.
Well, like I said, thanks.
Yeah. So why don't you walk us through the story of your professional history that led you to what is today Anura?
Oh, let's see. Well, my digital online career started in 1993, which predeceased the web browser. There was no web browser back then, so everything was techie, which was up my field at that point. And I was basically hooked on the internet. It was an email newsletter that I started. And I even remember getting an alert from Yahoo when they had their 10,000th listing, just to give you an example of time. My first web browser was Netscape 0.93 Alpha. So this was early, I think 1994-ish, I think is when that first came out.
I'm at least old enough to visualize the Netscape icon, right? It was a capital N with like some spatial looking background, I think.
Yeah, that's very nostalgic. Whenever I hear the word Netscape, it takes me back 20 years ago.
Well, do you go back as far as Northern Lights?
Right.
The first search
engine.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I got like vague, fuzzy memories of that, but yeah, you're right.
Or Alta Vista, or all these different ones that came out. So, like I said, I was hooked on the internet from day one. I even did an ISP out of my house. I originally was developing websites in the mid '90s, and thought it'd be kind of cool to build an ISP in my house, and put 300 phone lines in my house, put a T1 into the house, and then just built the network so that people can log on to the internet using our system. In fact, when we did that, we were the first company on the East Coast to adopt the USR Robotics 56K modem technology. So for a very short stint of time, we were the fastest ISP on the East Coast, which was kind of cool. Let's see, that eventually became another company called Paid for Surf, where we used to pay people to surf the web. And the thing was just a typical .com success story, right? We basically launched it in December December of 99. And the first day we had like 500 signups, to sign up to get paid surfing the web. And by the end of the first month, so by the end of January 2020, we had over 30,000 members. By the end of the first 5 months, we did our first $1 million in ad sales. And by the end of the first quarter, we had an offer for $60 million on the company. So a 3-month-old company, valued at $60 million. And we had everything all lined up and ready to rock and roll for April 28th of 2000. And as we all know, April 14th is when the .com bubble burst. So the deal came off the table. And I just kind of built different companies from that point. playing in all different types of technology, typically in the marketing side. Even came across in the late 90s fraud. So I wrote some software, which was, I would say, was 69 lines of code that was able to identify fraud back then.
Right. I'm assuming you
was,
need more lines of code nowadays.
yeah. When I stopped writing it myself, we were at 150,000 lines of code. And now it's way beyond that. Because once you start getting into machine learning and all that stuff, it gets crazy.
Of course. Let's talk about Anura. Who is Anura?
Let's see. Anura is actually, it's a relatively new company. It's only 4 years old. But the technology that built it, we started back in 2005. I was doing online marketing and driving traffic and realized that there was fraud in what I was buying. So I figured, look, I've got a marketing agency. I'm just going to run out, license a fraud technology and call it a day. And to my surprise, in 2005, there were no fraud solution companies out there. So as a developer, I wrote it myself. I figured, let me just write the code myself. I've done it before. Let's do it again and start using it. So
which brings us to today's topic, actually, the biggest topic of the day. Carlos, would you like to introduce that for us?
Absolutely. Happy to, Kim. Okay, so today's topic, as chosen by our guest, was how big of an issue is ad fraud? So we're going to be discussing whether it's a matter of if ad fraud is affecting you, but it's a matter of how much it is affecting you. So first question that I have for you, Rich, our guest, is why did you choose this particular topic, or why did you feel it was relevant for today's day and age? Let's start with that, please.
Sure. The reason why I chose that is a lot of people that I talk to don't realize that ad fraud is a problem. Mm-hmm. I'll talk to people that do lead generation or e-commerce, and they'll say, hey, as long as I get somebody to fill out the form and submit, I know it's not a bot. I know it's real. And yet I'll ask them the same question. Have you ever called a lead and the person on the other end of the phone swears up and down they never filled out your form? They say, oh, yeah, it happens all the time. I go, that's fraud. And then I start walking them through the process, and they don't realize that it's eating up a huge chunk of their budget. And a lot of people, they think at this point, there's a lot of companies out in the marketplace, by now fraud must have been solved, and yet it's growing exponentially right now. Just to give you a quick history on the growth of fraud, back in, let's call it mid 2012 to about 2016, it was about $6 or $7 billion a year in stolen advertiser funds. So that's a big number. Mm-hmm. But what ended up happening in 2018, it jumped up to almost 20 billion. By 2019, it was over 40 billion. And it's expected to be over 100 billion within the next 2 years. Oh. And people don't realize how fast that is and how much that's growing. And then those numbers that I'm quoting you I've got from a couple different locations that I feel are very conservative.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So going back, what is the definition of ad fraud? I'm still kind of confused. Whoever is being fraudulent, what do they benefit from submitting a fraudulent form with false contact information? What's the point? Obviously it harms me. I'm calling a lead that isn't a lead, and now I'm wasting my time, potentially damaging my brand, whatever else that might imply. But what's in it for those who are actually doing the fraud?
Money. It's usually about money.
Yeah.
So watch this, right? Let's say somebody fills out a form that's on your site. We're just going to stick with lead generation right now, just because a lot of companies out in the marketplace drive traffic to their site from a variety of channels to ultimately generate a lead that they can call and hopefully do business with. So let's just look at it from that aspect. Some companies will actually go out and buy traffic and pay people to fill out that form. That's kind of obvious, right? So if you fill out more forms, you make more money. It's pretty obvious. But then you can go to the very top of the channel, right? And let's say they're buying traffic from programmatic and they're generating impressions. Well, whether you're using programmatic technology or a good marketing person, if you generate so many impressions from a given source and there's no clicks, you realize there's no performance, so you shut it down, right? So they're smart enough, fraudsters are smart enough to know, okay, I've got to generate fake clicks on my impressions in order to still make money on my impressions. Now, let's keep going down the chain. You generate so many clicks to somebody's website and they don't generate a lead form, Again, we're sticking with that example. The marketing person is going to realize, okay, this is not a source that performs. Let's shut it down. And they're smart enough to know that. So they know that if they generate so many impressions, they have to generate so many false clicks, and then ultimately have to generate so many false impressions in order to keep getting paid on the impression side. So typically, I mean, there are other situations where fraud comes in place that do not involve making money, like competitive fraud and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's all about money.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I actually have a question. I'm sorry, Carlos.
No, please go ahead. Then Mariel, then I'll jump in. Thank you.
Okay. Well, when we hear the topic art fraud, we're just thinking in a general way, like I'm paying for something and I'm not receiving that. What are the types of art frauds that we can find, or that people is being tricked into buying?
So at the end of the day, there's a couple things I can answer with that. So when you look at ad fraud in our view comes from one of three vehicles. It's either bots, malware, or human fraud, right? There's a lot of subsets underneath those, but just to keep the topic general, those are the three areas that fraud can happen. And when you look at it from channel, so let's say if it's tier 1 search and social, they tend to be a little bit, because they control their audience a little bit better, they tend to be on the lower end of fraud. And just to give you an example, average across the board, we find about 25% of all marketing is fraudulent. So if you look at tier 1 and tier 1 search and social, you tend to be on the lower side of that, 5 to 10% fraud. If you're buying through affiliates or programmatic, you're going to be on the upper end of that, somewhere between 40 and 50% fraud. And one of the things that you're going to see is a lot of people spend a lot of money on programmatic buys, right? Buying ads all over the place, retargeting, all that kind of stuff. And pretty much every DSP that's in the market that you buy from is going to tell you, hey, we use a great, fraud solution, so you don't have to worry about fraud. It's been eliminated. We're catching 2 to 3% fraud. It's all handled. What they don't tell you is that what they're using is a pre-bid filter. And a pre-bid filter is only designed to catch the basic types of fraud. It's called GIBT, general invalid traffic. It's only designed for that. And fraudsters know this. So they do use more sophisticated attacks to come down the pipe and eventually attack your campaign to where they're hitting somewhere between 40 and 50% of your budget's chewed up by sophisticated fraud.
Crazy.
Rich, I got a question. I'm trying to envision two possible scenarios, and I'm talking about, for example, two different types of campaigns at two different types of companies. For example, one, you have a company that's implementing an outreach campaign, an inbound campaign, where they're maybe offering a fintech product for the general public. And they might, through the campaign, there's some pre-qualification criteria. And so that's like how the channel works, right? But then on the other side is maybe a service company that's not really offering a product, that's putting out an outbound campaign to where they might have, let's say, a chat bot or a robot, where they're basically looking to interact with people. Okay, so we have two different scenarios where in both cases there's some interaction with the public, but the objectives are different, right? Mm-hmm. So how in these two possible scenarios, is there some kind of let's call it a type of technology that can help both cases, both scenarios, to prevent maybe misrepresentation, or I'm just trying to think of possible situations that I've personally seen. Like, I wonder, why do people do this? I mean, why do they try to find workarounds? Maybe they were not qualified in one situation, but they are looking for ways to work around the situation and then find another possibility to be considered. I don't know. I'm just thinking from the top of my head. How is this possible? How can we help these companies prevent these types of situations?
It comes down to, like I said, each situation I would have a lot of questions to try to understand where the fraud's coming from, right? And sometimes, like I said, for us, we've been doing this for the last 16 years, so we can definitely positively identify fraud with a greater than 99.999% accuracy. However, understanding why the fraud is happening in every scenario, that's sometimes a lot more difficult, because you really got to understand the buyer's journey through the entire system. And I'll give you on that first example, I'll give you an example. We're working with one of the larger companies around that does music, and they give away free music for 30 days. You can sign up for an account, get free music for 30 days, and then move over to a paid client, right? So they're running into an issue where people are basically fabricating accounts using scraper bots, a type of advanced bot, to come in and create these user accounts so that they never have to worry about paying for music. So there's a scenario there where, granted, they're driving a lot of traffic. They want to eliminate that. And there's a big chunk, there's a huge percentage of the traffic that's creating accounts, creating those issues. So that's an issue of itself, right? You look at the other side where you're talking about a SaaS-based solution, maybe with a chatbot or something like that. The interaction of typically going to the chatbots, there may not be a benefit. There may be, it depends on this. There's a lot of questions you have to look at, the entire buyer's journey to find out where the benefit is. But again, the benefit is going to be somebody on that company's got to pay to drive marketing, right? Now, there is a scenario where we don't typically pay for marketing, so there's no technical benefit, I should say financial benefit to a fraudster for doing it, which would be organic traffic. So if you're doing content marketing and stuff like that and driving organic traffic, I always call it the free traffic of the internet, because you don't typically pay for it, but you pay a lot of money to generate it. So why would they do that? Well, I actually wrote an article for Forbes that talked about how organic traffic can get you sued. And the whole premise behind that is, I'm a fraudster, and there's a type of advanced bot that we've caught. What they do is they spin up the bot. The bot starts searching Google for, let's say if they're going to be targeting an insurance campaign, they start doing searches for insurances, not pounding it, but they're doing searches. They're clicking on organic listings. They're clicking on different things, and they're building their social profile over a period of 3 days. This one particular bot that we found. So they basically ramp up their volume throughout the day. They tater it down at night. They shut off at night like a person in that location would do. So now all that traffic that's been coming through organically is committed by a bot. Now, when they click on a link, they get to the site, they don't just drop. They want to make it look real. So when the bot gets to the site, they start clicking on things, bouncing around the site, maybe fill out a form. But all they're doing really is building that social profile for that particular bot, that user, right? Once they build up, and what we saw is after 3 days of doing this, they realize they have enough credentials to say I'm a real user, and then they go commit ad fraud, where they get paid usually for the next 30 to 60 minutes, because that's about how long a lot of fraud solutions take in the marketplace to be able to ramp up and catch them. So they get able to get past all these solutions, do their business, shut down, recycle, and start the process all over again. Now, what's scary is that it's a bot, which takes very little resources to run in the cloud. So you can spin up a cloud and then launch 10,000 or 100,000 of these bots simultaneously and have them all doing the same thing. So that when they're committing their fraud, they can generate tens of thousands of clicks in a very short period of time, which, a couple bucks a click adds up real quick.
Oh, wow.
So it's like you might not even be the end target. You're just a way to get to the means. Or means to get to the end, I guess. You just happen to be your use.
Collateral damage, right?
Yeah.
That's really what it is.
Yeah. Okay. So, Rich, we got an audience. We got a question from the audience here internally. The question is, are publishers still doing arbitrage? That was such, they say, well, it says that was such a source of fraud. What's the latest on that trend, please?
There's still, well, the question is, are there blogs out there? Yes, right?
Of course.
So they're considered a publisher, and do blogs, subsidize their stuff by putting ads on the page? Yes. So of course that model still exists, but what they're referring to, a little ways ago, was there were people that would spin up sites that were brand spanking new and have more traffic than Google's homepage inside of hours, and that's obviously all fabricated. It's not real traffic. So people used to use the Alexa rankings for that kind of stuff. But what's interesting is that model still exists today, and through because publishers do it. But again, the more premium publishers, right, aren't doing that. They're not trying to defraud their audience. They're trying to do things right and make a living and do things proper. But there are some people that build up a site, they publish their content, and then they want to augment some of their traffic. So they go out and they start buying traffic from different locations, and there can come fraud from that, unbeknownst to them. They're not doing it on purpose, but somewhere in the sources that they're buying could potentially have fraud, and that could create an issue.
Yeah, it's really freaky because it's one of those things like in life, con artists, fraudsters, if that's what we're calling them, how they're so in tune to human nature. They're pin it down. Like, this is how a human reacts and this is what I have to mimic. It's scary. But going to this human nature, let's talk about the tech side. How can we use tech, right? We tapped into the humanity. Now let's tap into the tech. I think you threw out a number of most fraud detection takes anywhere between 30 to 60 minutes to shut down. My assumption
change that in a second.
Anura, okay, my assumption is that Anura is faster than that. Am I right?
Well, yes, and there's a reason behind it. So essentially, most fraud solutions, again, when we caught this bot, this was probably about 5-6 years ago. When we caught this bot, most fraud solutions at that time, once they saw a new trend of fraud, would take a period of time. And some of the more faster ones would take 30 to 60 minutes to catch the new fraud and roll out some update to prevent that. Our system is designed to be significantly faster. We can typically pick it up the instant it happens. Just because we've been monitoring trillions of visitors over the last 16 years, we've seen pretty much everything that's out there. And then, of course, the new stuff as it rolls out, we're able to pick up very, very quickly. But again, most fraud companies, like I said, there's only a handful of us that are out there that actually do stuff in what's called real time. So in other words, somebody comes from a given source. It could be from a publisher. It could be from Google Paid. It could be anywhere programmatic. It comes to your site. And literally within 1 second, we can tell you if that person is real or fake with extreme accuracy. And that is really the key, is understanding that person that just landed on your site is fraudulent. Now you have an opportunity to make some decision logic in your code to deal with a fraudulent user in real time right then and there, so that they don't fill out a form, they don't process a credit card. You can stop them right then and there.
Rich, I have a question talking about, going into the tech topic. Do you think the advancement of technology, for example, artificial intelligence, it's just growing each day. A lot of companies are including AI into their business, their software. Do you think this is going to be something that is going to help companies avoid fraud, or maybe on the other side is something that is going to help fraudsters to keep on going?
It's a catch-22, right? Both sides, the good guys and the bad guys, both have access to the same tools. So it's like anything else. One guy starts using AI, the other guy's got to start using AI, and there's using things back and forth. But the one thing we always talk about is AI is only as good as the person who wrote the code. So it just like growing up, you're only as good as what you've been taught. And the same thing with AI. AI is a child that needs to be taught. And if you teach it, the wrong way to find fraud, it's not going to be accurate. So again, it's only as good as the person behind it.
We can take technology to help us identify fraud much faster, as you laid out, almost in real time. Going back to the human side now, I have a question from the audience, which is there a easy litmus test, I guess, a regular old test for a human marketer to perhaps be able to identify if traffic is not real or not? Like, are there any key markers or trends that we should maybe look out for?
So,
or is it just too much for a person to do?
And it's different. It's varying degrees, right? So you have, I'll give you an example. We're using the lead generation tactic. Again, you're driving traffic to generate a lead. So there's a simple thing called a honeypot that some people will tend to use to try to get the obvious fraud off their network. So in other words, basically somebody comes to a form, and let's say you're not asking somebody for your phone number, but you put a hidden input field into your form saying phone number. So you're anticipating the phone number to be entered. Well, a bot coming along doesn't know any different because it doesn't see the page, it sees the actual code, realizes you're looking for a phone number and pre-populates with a phone number, hits submit. If you get a form submitted to you that contains a phone number, that wasn't on the form that the person can see from a human standpoint, you know you got something that shouldn't have happened. That'll catch some of your basic bots, right? Some basic bots and malware. But really, in this day and age, to catch the more advanced bots, human fraud, because human fraud is gonna when a human fraud person comes to your site and sees a form, they're only going to fill out what they see. A lot of people use technology to record what's happening on that screen, and it's going to be a real person. So that's why fraudsters are deploying more and more human fraud farms, because it's cheaper and it gets past bot and malware detection. So is there any easy test? If it was easy, I wouldn't be in business with this product. Like I said, I've dedicated the last 16 years of my life building it. So there's in order to solve the problem, there's really no simple way to do it. It just takes time. And I'll give you an example. The way we do things is when somebody lands on your website, we're collecting somewhere near 800 data points on that user's environment. We know how all those data points are supposed to look, how they're supposed to interact with each other, how they play a role in your environment. And from that information, we can read what we've done over the years is the digital footprint of fraud. So is there an easy way to do that? No. If it was easy, there would be an article published somewhere that somebody can just, hey, take this piece of code, put it here and deploy it. But like I said, basic bots, honeypot still works. I can't tell you how many people come to us and they're looking to advance from the basic side because they're a new startup. They don't have the money to invest in a fraud solution, so they'll start with the basic tests. So if you have you have a hidden input field, it's very inexpensive to put in. And if it does catch anything, you definitely know it's fraud. So there's a basic way. Now you do have some other tools out there that are free for up to certain usage. But there's some caveats with it, like CAPTCHA. CAPTCHA is a tool that AI has proven to beat. CAPTCHA also puts these funky puzzles in front of you that 30% of the time humans fail. They don't stop.
I'm like, damn it, I missed that third motorcycle.
But yeah, so you missed that on it, right? So there's a problem. And they also determined that putting a CAPTCHA in front of a user basically slows down your process and actually reduces conversions by 40% because people get frustrated with them and just go to someplace else to deal with it.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, there is, fortunately for companies like us, but unfortunately for people like your audience, there's no simple way to solve it other than taking advantage of an advanced fraud solution that's performance focused.
What's the tipping point? When can I say I need to take an advanced fraud solution? Like, is anybody in every business, or is there like, you're ready now? It's worth it.
It comes down. Okay, look at it. There's a couple different ways to answer that, right? So depending on the situation you're in, if you're an e-commerce person and you're starting to see your chargebacks start to climb and you're getting close to the endangered zone, because you have too much fraud that you're going to lose your merchant account, now's the time to get that started, because you don't want to lose your merchant account as an e-commerce platform, because that'll kill your business. If you're calling leads that are being filled out by human fraud farms, every time you call somebody who didn't fill out the form and they say, no, I never filled out your form, you just broke TCPA compliance. So now you don't want to wait for a lawsuit to happen, but inevitably, if you make enough phone calls, that's possible. So it gets to the point when, like most of us out there offer free trials, right? So take advantage of a free trial, get the pricing, and see where the pricing makes sense from a financial standpoint. But if you're going to be spending any type of money marketing, you want to go out there protected, just because the fraud is so bad out there. And theoretically, if the fraud solution is doing its job, it should make you or save you more money than what you're spending on the solution. That's typical ROI. That's where it should be. So hopefully that helps.
Rich, I got a question from one of our teammates, Fausto from Sales and Marketing. And the question is there like an easy test for a regular marketer to find out if traffic is not real?
I asked that question.
You did. I'm sorry, Kim. I lost.
The answer is no. That's where we got on the whole honeypot trail.
I see. No, I see. You know what? I apologize. The question that I read internally was delayed on my end when I read it, so I thought that it wasn't. But yeah, I was like, yeah, wait a minute.
You're the one with the steam-powered internet now.
I got steam-powered internet. I apologize. No, never mind. Anyway, well, this is what makes Dojo Live a human thing. There's always room for error, and And I would like to, Rich, just mention that we're approaching the final segment of today's conversation, and I wouldn't want to wrap it up without asking you, now moving just a little bit away from the topic itself and now focusing more on Anura as a company. And this is because we might have viewers out there who might be, I don't know, engineers, developers, or what have you, that might be looking at Anura as an interesting company to work for. So were that the case, what would you say that makes Anura a great company to work for? What is the company culture like? What do you look for in your team members?
We look for people to be themselves. It's part of our core values is probably the best way to describe it. For, basically authentic. Be yourself. I don't care. It doesn't matter who you are. We don't want fakeness within the company, right? We have enough fraudsters that we deal with. We don't need anybody being fake inside the company. So be who you are.
Okay.
And and hopefully that fits in with the group that we have here, because we're kind of the typical .comers from early days of just having fun, focusing on work, getting things done. Part of our culture here is never being satisfied. We'll just finish up we just rolled out actually a new dashboard view today. And we looked at it and said, wow, this is great. But we could do all these other cool kind of things. Like it's never done. Nothing here is ever finished. It's always fine tuning, tweaking, we work together as a team again, in our core values is all about being united, working together as a team. We need team players. We don't want individual, people who want to do everything by themselves. We want to be able to rely on every member here in the company. And then finally, it's about having a lot of fun. We'd like to focus on enjoying what we do every day. Let's face it, we're in the office. We've been in the office since June. I'm not a big fan of working from home. When I first started our first group of companies, we got an office just for us to work for. So we had our work life separate from our home life, because when those two mix together, especially with 4 kids and a couple businesses, it's too much. You want to be able to separate things, and that's how we do it. So those are the kind of things that we look for in team members, is just all about, being able to get the job done, being able to accomplish what we're looking for, and have some fun doing it.
Appreciate it so much, Rich. All right. Well, it seems like we're about to wrap up, and I don't know. I'd like to close today's conversation with a simple request. If you were to share, Rich, some final words of wisdom with the audience about anything we've spoken about today, what would it be?
The thing, again, just from a marketing standpoint, if you're out there spending money marketing, definitely get your traffic tested. Like I said, most companies like ourselves include a free trial, so you can benchmark, do you have a problem? Because that's the first question. Like I said, the topic of this is not a problem if you have a problem, it's how much. And that's the case. Right. I've never put somebody on who doesn't have fraud. They all have fraud. It's just what level of fraud do you have? Know where you stand, because again, your customers are going to hold you accountable to the traffic that you sell them if you're an agency, or your brand and your ROI is going to hold you accountable to what you're buying in the marketplace. So it's good to know what you're buying, where it's coming from, and get a good benchmark on where you are to make that decision when it's time to include a fraud solution in your path.
Absolutely. Well, Rich, it's been a great pleasure to have you here today. And folks, for those of you who are watching, please stay tuned for this conversation, because it's going to be shared on our website, on Dojo Labs website. All the information to Anura is going to be right there on the website, and of course to Rich Kahn, the CEO. So, Rich, the only thing left for me to do is thank you big time for been with us today. So please stay with us as we wrap up. We're just going to make a quick announcement here. Tomorrow we're going to be having right here on Dojo Live, we're going to be speaking with Megan Killian, the Vice President of Marketing at Cachefly, which is a video technology company, and the topic is going to be uniting audiences through emerging video technology. So that's what we're going to be having right here on Dojo Live tomorrow at 12 p.m. Pacific. So join us tomorrow. Thanks, Rich. Thank you, Kim. And thank you, Mariela, as ever. Stay safe.
Bye.